I'm Simon Wallace. I'm one of the committee members of the Consultancy Specialist Group at BCS. You'll also be able to see the chair, who is Alan Moore, and another committee member who is Antonio Hidalgo. And Antonio is responsible for monitoring your questions and comments via the chat system. So today we have Colin Butcher talking about managing projects and mixed teams. Colin is a consulting engineer who has led the design and implementation of mission critical and disaster tolerant systems in a wide range of industries. Much of his work involves the mentoring and development of project teams, in addition to developing practical solutions to the complex technical and business issues. Colin, are you there?
So this is another take on consulting, which is working with projects and teams of people. Understand, first of all, what I call the duty of care. So this is something that I think is desperately important. If you get involved in a project, it comes with a collection of responsibilities. Some of them are yours, some of them are the client's. And it's really helpful to figure out as best you can where the boundaries are, because that basically is going to form the statement of work that you're going to agree with the client. And that's going to change over time. And so it's important to keep a track of it. But understanding your duty of care can really bring clarity into the decision making. Let me give you an example. So one of the things I've done recently, we finished it back end of last year, was the design and implementation of the third generation of all the systems that run all the blood transfusion services for the country. And that was kind of useful because of all the COVID stuff and plasma testing and the drive for donors and all those good things. So trying to figure out how to get a lot of the discussions under control came down to the simple fact that if this thing doesn't work properly, there's a very good chance that we're going to kill people, or people are going to die as a result. And that gives you, it's a really simple example, but it gives you a really good yardstick for making decisions. So it's not about all sorts of things, it's about doing the right thing under the circumstances, but understanding your duty of care helps you figure out what the right thing is to be doing. The other thing that's really useful if you're running a group of people, or helping to lead a group of people rather than running them, is explaining that is kind of the first thing you can do to help build some kind of rapport and develop empathy with the team of people. It's interesting, this, isn't it? We're hearing the same sorts of stuff from different angles. Empathy, understand, doing the right thing, duty of care. It's about building relationships with the people you're going to be working with and leading them to do things for themselves, not doing it for them. I thought it might be helpful to think a bit about what consulting is. So in general, it's about problem solving. Most people in some kind of business, in most businesses, end up doing problem solving. And the reason, and this has already been referred to in different ways earlier by David and Gary, is the reason you're asked in is things are complicated and difficult. It might be that they're complicated and difficult technically, and they are also likely to be complicated and difficult with explaining it to other people. You know, the expert witness approach is another piece of complicated and difficult. Somebody's got to unpick the whole thing, pull it all apart, find out how all it hangs together and explain it back to other people. So as people coming in, it's not usually the easy stuff that you get to do. And the more experience you have of this and the more experience you have of explaining things to other people, the less difficult it can become. It's also responsible and it can be stressful. I tend to refer to things as being high responsibility rather than high stress, but the two do go kind of hand in hand to some extent. And as Simon, I think, said earlier, you know, you don't find out whether it was fun until actually the dust has settled and it's all over. And usually it is. And it's really good when you've helped to do something and the team of people that you've been working with keep working together without you, but they keep in touch. And that's really great when it happens. Now, the key thing to remember about working as a consultant is you're an outsider. You know, some people might view you as a bandit or a pirate or an alien or whatever else, but you're not part of their regular day-to-day working until you're there, helping them, working with them, leading them, pushing them, whatever. And that very fact affects how people are going to behave towards you and how you are, like it or not, going to be behaving towards them. And so this developing empathy, rapport, and all the rest of it, again, is desperately important because you've got to do that fairly quickly and work with people to help them understand things. One of the more complicated things I ever got to do was, I was about 15 years ago. It was technically horrendously complicated, which is why I got asked in. When we were trying to unpick, reverse engineer and rearrange all the pieces that made up air traffic control systems for UK and North Europe airspace. And that was a hell of a lot of responsibility, and it was incredibly complicated. And there was a very decent sized team, 40, 50 people, of really good people. And you had to get their respect very fast, because without that, you don't really have any authority to be able to make changes. Yeah, you've only got the authority that people give you because you can't just be handed it on a plate. You have to earn it. And you can't really take responsibility for things if you don't have some kind of authority for being able to make things happen. But often you don't have the direct authority. So everything is about how you influence people by developing rapport and empathy with them. So it's a really, really subtle, complicated thing to do. And it's very easy to come across, particularly if you're allegedly the expert in the field, it's horribly easy to come across as being potentially seen as arrogant or pushy. And you've really got to work at not doing that. And that's very, very, very important. It also really helps if the values of the people you're working with have to match your own. Because trust, yet another word that's been used a lot, is desperately important. And you have to, yeah, you're the outsider, you're the guest on their territory. So somehow you've got to be able to encourage them to listen to you. So the way I found that works is basically treat it as teaching. So you learn from them. And the great thing about teaching is that you learn as well, right? This is really important. So by helping them to understand what they're doing, you learn more about what they're doing. They understand their systems and their business better than you do. You're just an outsider. You're just seeing things a bit differently. And that's really useful. So it's this bi-directional discussion and teaching that's really, really important. And that's all about doing the right thing. And the other thing is to realize that quite often you're dealing with people who are under horrendous stress. You know, something really bad has happened. That might be why you're there. You know, you might be doing some really nasty, complicated troubleshooting under a lot of stress. And when people are under a lot of stress, it's the emotional things again, right? They can behave really difficultly, really differently, really badly, really well. You know, it's surprising who steps up and really contributes. You know, the guy who's normally complaining in the corner might turn out to be the most useful guy on the planet once you put him under enough pressure that he really, really shines. And that does happen. And similarly, somebody you think is technically horrendously complicated, you know, technically really competent, might actually not quite have the level of knowledge that they thought, and they might come apart at the seams. All sorts of interesting things can happen under high stress. So you've got to be aware of that and how the people are behaving and deal with it accordingly. And there are all sorts of tricks and techniques you can use. And sometimes you just borrow ideas. One of the ideas I unashamedly have borrowed from somebody else is, if you are turning up and you haven't seen the project team for a bit, meet up for breakfast. One of the extensions of that, we were doing some data center moves once, and it was weekends, and it was, you know, the data centers, as always, weren't in terribly nice parts of a terribly nice city. So I don't know, the local kitchen shop where I live had little Nespresso machines on sale, and they were half price. I bought two, stuck one in each data center, went past a supermarket between the hotel and where the data centers were, bought a whole load of pastries, croissants, stuff like that, some fruit juice. Everybody turned up. We all had a civilized breakfast. Everybody stood around and talked to each other rather than throwing email at each other. And just getting all those social aspects working really helped us. And then we sort of charged into data center, did what we had to do, came out again, and everybody had a reasonably nice time about it. And doing things like that, just little things can make an incredible difference. And the contractual documents, yeah, they're there. You need to refer to them. You've got to keep track of changes over time. That's really useful too, because that is an important and boring part of what you have to do. This is something else I'd like people to think about. It's fundamentally, it's what's going on in your head and in their heads. So your brain's your primary tool. So you've got to keep it in good shape. You don't want to be overloading it with all sorts of things. And you have to work with other people. Never ever do anything on your own. The great thing about teaching, the great thing about working with other people is it slows you down and it helps bring them up to speed. And that you can catch mistakes very fast, because the act of explaining things to other people and encouraging other people to explain what they're doing is really important, because it helps everybody start to understand what the problem is, and it helps everybody think about what they're about to do. So following the process is good too. Something else I have a big thing about with design particularly, and troubleshooting, is recording the decisions that get made. And it's all about judgment. And often you've got to make a certain stack of assumptions about things in order to get moving. But once you've got moving, it's all about working with the other people. There's a really great book. I don't know whether anybody's read it. The Mythical Man Month by Brooks. I think there's a reference to it coming up on the slide, but I really encourage people to read that. That's very good for dealing with software projects. So key points for me about going in somewhere, doing this sort of heavy duty technical consulting, is building your knowledge base and increasing your understanding and being prepared to share that and pass it on. And the other thing that's worth doing is practicing how you communicate your ideas. So if you haven't done talks and lectures and things like that, it's really worth doing it. And it's also really worth knowing other people who can do that too. One of the most invaluable things is building a sort of peer group. They don't have to be in the same company. They don't have to be in the same country. But you have to know each other and trust each other. So I've got friends in Colorado. So, Al in Colorado, if I phone up, it's great to catch up because we haven't spoken for a bit. But he'll put things aside and do me the favor of giving me the time because I probably need some help. And similarly, if Anders in Stockholm chooses to phone me, it's great to catch up, but I'm going to put other things aside and help him. That's a really important thing to be able to do. It's this level of trust. And ideally, that's what you want to be developing within the team of people you're working with and potentially leading, because you want everybody to trust each other and share ideas and help each other out. And somehow, as an outsider, you've got to foster that way of working within the team and encourage people to do stuff. And you've got to keep things, having a consistent understanding. This is where the book by Brooks, the Mythical Man Month, is really important. It brings out a lot of the importance of the interpersonal communication. This developing a rapport, this developing empathy, and communication is the key. Well, the other thing I tend to find with projects, and I'm sure others of you found it, is too often the budget and the schedule gets set first before people understand what the problem is. That's not a great way to start off. So understanding the problem well enough to be able to set a sensible budget and a sensible schedule, and being prepared to revisit it when needed. That's really important. And that's one of the great things about being an outsider. You can actually go back to the directors of the business or whatever and say, look, terribly sorry, this is not really what you thought. It's not really what any of us thought. We really do need to rethink some of this. In some cases, it might be much easier. In some cases, it might be much more difficult. And as the outsider being brought in, one of the hard things you have to do is to go and have those kinds of conversations on behalf of the team of people you're working with. So all this stuff is really important. I think the most important thing here are the last two bullets, particularly the last one. But there's something particularly good for me about talking to people in person. If you jump on a plane, go see them. If you can't do that, go and use the phone. Don't throw email around, especially late at night. Talk to people. You can get so much more. It's the hostage negotiation thing again, isn't it, right? But being really prepared to do this. And there's something subliminal going on here too, isn't there? Which is, you're the outsider. You're supposed to know what you're doing. You've been brought in. If you make the effort to go and sit with people and see them in a different office or in a different country, and you sit with them and you listen to them and you help them learn, you've done them the courtesy of meeting with them in person. You've made them, they're worth your time. There's a subliminal thing going on there that they're worth dealing with, that you're prepared to make the effort. And that's desperately important, as is thanking them afterwards. And of course, at the point at the top is equally important. They know their business. They know their systems better than you do. You're just an observer. You're coming up with ideas. You can explain, well, it might be, what do you think of this? This could work. And bouncing ideas back and forth. It can really get places. And if you're helping to lead projects, so I'm not a project manager. Let's be really clear about that. I know lots of really great project managers, and having a really great project manager to work with is fantastic and desperately important. I'm more the technical lead than the project management. And between you, again, this is a collaborative thing with key people in the teams. You've got to get the estimating and planning right. You can't know everything up front. All of these things are really important. And when you're working under real pressure, it's amazing how much people forget to do things. So checklists are really important because it's terribly easy to miss something if you don't do that. And you need lots of good information, and you need to keep talking to people. Everybody's got to be, all of this stuff is just different ways of saying the same kinds of things. It's about dealing with people. Point I would like to bring out there is the second one, which is this: don't rush to respond. One of the things, these things are a curse. We seem to have entered a world where the first to respond is often seen as being right, as opposed to the person who's being thoughtful. And that I find is a real problem, because if you get too much stuff being thrown around in a hurry using that, you end up on the back foot all the time and trying to fight bad information and opinions with more accurate information. This is the emotive stuff, be the rational stuff. But if you're doing the problems, finding out information, this is what Gary was saying earlier, you can't rush at it, and you shouldn't just take the first few answers you get. You've got to have a holistic, rounded view and make sense of things. It's also really helpful to have good administrative support as well, because that can help things happen. So ideally, we're trying to build groups of people who work really well together. And I think you're looking for people who are willing to share and help each other, and then taking stuff again. And it's, we're all in this together. And being sick, it's a bit like, really good medics. There's a minimum necessary level of self-confidence to do the job, but the moment that spills over into being arrogant and pushy, it gets bad. So for me, the really great people are the ones who really like teaching and who are prepared to share all their knowledge and stuff along the way. I had to have hip replacement about 12 years ago. And the big thing for me was what kind of person was the consultant I was going to go and talk to. And it was quite interesting. So I went into the hospital to meet the person, and I was sat at the end of the corridor, and you could see there were some consultants were walking down the corridor, and staff were kind of not talking to them or just disappearing out the way or whatever. And then there were others where people were actually willingly opening the doors or coming out and saying hello to them and chatting to them all the way down the corridor. That, fortunately, was the kind of guy who ended up doing my hip. And we've kept in touch since because we get on. But it's this, do people share? Do people teach? Do people go out of their way to help each other? That's what you're really looking for. So this is where it comes back. Now then, this is something else that a lot of people don't particularly talk about as a consultant. I've started thinking about this a lot because I'm actually at the end of my career. I'm trying to put down working, not terribly successfully, but there you go. But if you take things like the stuff we did for the blood transfusion service, I was very conscious that I was now helping work on stuff where the projected working life of the systems is greater than my projected working life. So my duty of care means that I've got to pass that knowledge and information on. And that means I have to help other people make design decisions and the implementation decisions and let them do things their way, not mine. Because that's really important, because they're the ones who've got to live with it, not me. So I have to pass on knowledge and experience, encourage them to make their own decisions, encourage them to do things their own way. And I'm not then a single point of failure, which means I can then step away and leave them self-sustaining. But with luck, they're going to come back and discuss things every so often. And that's what happens. So it's kind of succession planning and a whole load of other things, because you're not trying to inconvenience people. You're trying to encourage people to do that way. And if you can do that, that's a great way. It also helps you end an assignment, if you will, but stay in touch with people. And that, for me, is really important. There's a book, again, another reference, another classic is The Trusted Advisor by David Maister. And that's well worth a read. So that's some thoughts about managing teams, managing people, and dealing with behaviors. Very similar underlying principles to all that went before, just expressed in a slightly different way under slightly different circumstances. So there we go. Thank you very much for listening. And now, how do we deal with the questions, please, Antonio?
Hi, Colin. Thank you very much. Really, really good talk. We had some comments from Margorat. I apologize if I pronounced wrong the name. Are you able to speak? Do you want to make the comments?
Yes, absolutely brilliant. Both of the talks, actually. I felt like a kid in the sweet shop. And because I'm teaching and doing research about developing empathy between software engineers, I'm just overwhelmed how many times I hear about empathy, duty of care, and how important it is to think about the problem and everything else. Is absolutely brilliant.
Great.
Thank you very much. Actually, to both of you, to all of you, for your presentations.
Great. I'm glad you found it. I'm glad you found it of interest, and it might even be helpful. That would be tremendous.
It's absolutely brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
Colin, there are a lot of comments again in the chat. I'm sure you haven't got time to study them all, but there's a lot of interest, a lot of interaction, a lot of sharing of ideas there. I would share one observation of my own on the subject of leadership. I used to teach, amongst other things, a session about leadership to senior people in a big consulting firm. And they all think that the subject of leadership is about looking up to see how they can become the next global leader, how they can be the chief executive. Whereas what I wanted to teach them is how to look down at the effect they have on their teams and their clients and the way they deliver their services. So leadership, in my view, is how good are you at leading your people, not how are you climbing the slippery slope to become the new chief executive.
Couldn't agree more.
Antonio, are there any particular comments we should pick out from the chat? Because I see it's been very busy.
Yeah, it has been busy. The two main, the two main people adding the comments were Margorazza, and also we have a couple of Duff. Duff was commenting on the Mythical Man Month.
Mythical.
Yeah.
Mythical.
It's a great book.
I agree.
What I really like about it is the way he explains the importance of really good people, because the communications overhead between them destroys the team if it gets too big. And the better the people are and the better in sync they are, it really clearly explains to me why a moderate number of really good top flight people will always do better than a big team.
I think it has been a great session again today, and thank you everybody who has participated, particularly the speakers. It's been excellent, a great audience, great set of subjects. Of course, we'll be doing this again next month and the month after, and until we've covered off all 21 topics on the last Wednesday of the month. It's been fun today. It'll be fun next time, and I hope we see you all again. So I think that's it for today, and you can disconnect and get back to your dinner. I've got pizza waiting. Good night.
Good night.
Great. Thanks for coming along and listening.